Hi guys, I'm really excited to be launching a new channel. So it's going to be the Xero guy. And to give you a bit of background about myself, I'm Stephen Edwards. I run an established successful accounting firm called CTA Profit First, CTA Accountants. We're based in Gloucestershire. We do have a channel where we talk a lot about profit first. We talk a lot about helping people be better business owners, but this channel is purely about Xero, which I'm quite excited about because Xero is my software. I've been using it for 10 years. I don't want to say a lot of people jumping on the Xero bandwagon because it makes a lot of sense because it's really the best bookkeeping software system out there. You're going to get a few people, it's a bit like PlayStation versus Xbox or Pepsi versus Coke. There might be some people saying QuickBooks is the best. I'm going to disagree with them. As I said, I've been using Xero for 10 years because around 10 years ago, when I started my accounting business sort of properly full time, I had to decide which online software am I going to put all my eggs in that basket for. And it was Xero. Xero's so far ahead of everyone else. It was the only system that was purely online, whereas things like Sage, QuickBooks, they still had one step on the old type of software. So anyway, this video, I'm going to give you a really quick walkthrough of some of the general features on Xero. I'm going to do deep dives into different areas. Please give me some comments, give me some feedback. What do you want to know from Xero? The general content is going to be around education in terms of how to use Xero, but also why should you run these reports as a business owner? Why do you want to look at these reports? What's the benefit to you? Why should you even be in there in the first place? Because there's an argument to say you're a business owner. Have you got better things to do? But actually, the balance to that is it's really important to know your numbers. If you've got a bit of basic knowledge about Xero, it's going to help you know your numbers. But equally, if you want deeper dives and you are the person doing the bookkeeping, I will go into a little bit more detail to do that. So, right, that's enough of me chatting. So this is actually the demo account on Xero. So this particular video, as I said, if you've been using Xero yourself for over a year or two, it might not be for you. If you want to learn a bit more about Xero and you're just getting involved, this is probably quite a good starting point for you. So this is the dashboard screen here on Xero. So click the dashboard. And basically, you can configure this dashboard to suit your business. Most businesses are probably going to pay attention to the invoices that are owed to them. So that depends if you actually raise your invoices in Xero. And we'll go into that in a second because you can go to business and invoices. You do need the right Xero package. Well, I think the starter package and the standard and the premium, all of them be fine. If you've got a deal with your accountant, sometimes there are packages that don't give you invoicing. So just speak to them if you don't have access to the invoicing. So if you do raise your invoices in Xero, I would say that's a good thing to do, by the way. A lot of people trying to do it in Word, trying to do it in Excel. It's just not worth the hassle. I mean, if you want to get with the 21st century and you want to stay on top of your finances, do it in Xero, even if it's cost you an extra 10, 20 quid a month. It makes so much more sense. And the thing is, then you can send statements to your customers. You can look at trends over time. I see some people having their invoices on a different system, as I said, Excel, Word, or even different bit of software. And then Xero is just their accountant. It's a bit balmy if you ask me. More than happy to do a deeper dive into that in the future. So that's what that is about. And on the left-hand side here, you've got your different bank accounts. So if you've got one bank account, it's probably going to show one account, business bank account. If you've got multiple, it will show more than one bank account here. So one of the most common things, one of the big areas with Xero and any bookkeeping system, to be fair, is bank reconciliation. I'm going to do a deep dive in terms of what is a bank reconciliation. What does it mean if you've got an accountant, they say you're going to do your own reconciliation, you're going to do your own bookkeeping. Most of it is around bank reconciliation. So when it says reconcile, different software systems might have different language. Xero call it reconcile, which I like. I prefer it. Makes sense. It's more of an accounting term. Other places, software might call it explain, code, whatever it means, but it's the same thing. Basically, what it means is if you've connected your bank account to Xero. And if you want to know specifically how to do that, that's probably for another video, but you can connect your bank account to Xero. So the bank transactions from your actual bank, whether you Santander, Barclays, Starling, they will feed through to the system, feed through to Xero. And they will sit here to say you need to reconcile these items. So if this was the first 29 items ever, you'd be doing it from day one. But for this demo company, the previous ones have probably already been done. So you go into here, and effectively the reconciliation screen, it might seem a bit busy. It might seem like there's a lot going on when you first look at it. But essentially on the left-hand side of the screen, you have a mirror copy of the bank statement. It might not look exactly the same if you've already gone in and reconciled some of your items, but not all of your items, because you'll be left with what you're left, if that makes sense. But if you've not done anything, it would pretty much mirror your bank statement. So the idea behind this is, rather than physically typing out or copying and pasting and messing around spreadsheets to get your bank transactions into some kind of order and some sort of system, or organize it so we know what you spent your money on or where your money's come from, we're trying to automate it to some extent, and that's where bookkeeping systems such as Xero really help. So the bank transactions automatically feed through to Xero. As on the left hand side, you can see money spent, money received. In your bank, it might say debit, credit. Okay. So, and then on the right hand side is what you are going to annotate, or you are going to tell the system, tell Xero, what is this transaction for? So if there's money going out, so for this one here, there's not enough information. I don't, just looking at it, it says fast payment. So I'm going to make it up as if it's your business. Let's pretend you know what that is. Let's pretend you're paying wages to someone. So you're paying wages to Joe Smith, and you can type in Joe Smith's name. If he's not already there as a contact, you can create a new contact. What does it relate to? Let's put it to salaries. Salaries, enter description, wages for, and it looks like wages because it's got to be the end of the month typically. Wages, June. Okay, there's going to be no VAT. I mean, it gets a bit technical when we start, and don't worry about these questions you might have in your head if you're new to all of this. If you're thinking, where do I code it to? What's the right categories? Is there VAT? All that sort of stuff. Don't worry about that at the moment. This is a bit of an overview. But generally, well, not generally, there will be no VAT on wages. The only instance there'll be VAT on wages is if it's not a salaried employee. You're paying a subcontractor, and that subcontractor is VAT registered. So, I mean, that's a good point, because me being the Xero guy, talking about Xero, I'm not just a Xero guy. I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm actually a chartered certified accountant. I'm a business owner. I employ accountants. We have, over a couple hundred business clients. So I have a lot of knowledge in terms of the whole ecosystem in terms of accounting and tax. So I will give you a bit more insight into actually accounts and tax if you carry on watching these videos. So let's put that to wages. If you're wondering why I keep on looking this way, it's because my wife's walking the dogs and they can be quite noisy when they come back. So I'm just keeping an eye out. Okay, so generally when it's white and it's blank, the system does not know what to do with these transactions. There's no previous kind of reconciliation. There's no previous action for them to use. So that's where you just do what we've just done. So we've got Smart Agency. Let's just see if Smart Agency is on here. Yes, they are. What is it for? Let's just say it's consulting. And that one, let's say there's VAT. So when it comes to VAT, again, that's a separate video, but I want to give you a little bit of an overview in case you're wondering. You really need a VAT invoice to know if there's VAT or not. You don't guess. So it might appear like I'm guessing, but generally I know if you're paying £4,500 to a company in the UK and it's an agency, they will be VAT registered, but you should have a VAT invoice, and you ideally use a different bit of software. So you either use HubDoc or Dext to actually manage the paperwork, which I'm going to cover in a separate video. So I'm going to send that off. I just want to really quickly touch upon the green transactions. So when it's green, it means that there's already an invoice for either money for sales, a customer that you'll raise an invoice on Xero, or there's an invoice for an expense already on the system. So what that basically means is you've used HubDoc, which again, I'm going to talk about this later on, or you've used Dext, you've put the invoice into that system, it gets sent through to Xero, and Xero's expecting that payment. So that's why it's matching green. I mean, on this particular transaction, and it's not the invoice it's matching to, it's because you've said it's been paid. So somebody's gone into the system and said this has already been paid. But it's the same principle. There's something that's already been entered on the system, and then you're just basically matching it later on. Okay, so don't worry if that's a little bit confusing. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in other videos. I think this is a really clear example. So if you've raised a sales invoice 35, you've raised it on Xero. Let's go have a quick look at that now, actually. So let's go into business. One little tip is use the right-click function so you can, you don't need to keep on closing and opening new tabs. We're going to find that invoice. So if it's invoice 35, Ridgeway University, we just went into business invoices. We're going to go into awaiting payment, and we should be able to see this invoice, Ridgeway University. There we go, invoice 35. So there's the actual invoice. So this invoice was raised in Xero like this. You know, you can actually view a PDF version of that if you want to as well. And you can save that and view the PDF. And that's been sent to a customer. There's VAT on it. And you've raised the invoice. And then what Xero knows, that's your income. But you've not received the money yet. So when you raise the invoice, you're just saying this is what we're expecting to receive. And when we come to do the bank reconciliation, so this is the 4th of August, and the invoice was raised on the 1st of August, they paid quite promptly within a few days. We're saying, oh, the money's now received in the bank, and we're going to match it against that invoice. So in a nutshell, that is the kind of basic bank reconciliation side. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the bank reconciliation because I want to do a deep dive on that later. So we've already sort of looked at invoicing. So if we go into the invoicing screen here, and let's say you raise a new invoice to a customer, you've done some work. Let's just search for a customer A, be wows, today's dates, services, obviously whatever your industry is. You can create these little shortcuts here, and you can create like default invoice descriptions and lines for your services. You know, if you sell certain products, for example, or you can enter it on the fly. So I'm just going to make it up and say for services delivered. It's making up that expression. In my business, it says accounting services, bookkeeping services, payroll, you know, whatever we do. So generally what you do is you do quantity one and the total price. If you want to break it down and you're doing 10 hours, if you're charging hourly or whatever, you can do that. 10 hours at, make something up, £35 an hour would come to 350, or you can just do 1 times whatever the total amount is. So generally you want to, at a top level, if its income is going to be sales, but if your business has got multiple income sources, or you've got different types of services and sales and products, you might want to start splitting your sales categories. So you might have 200 for general sales or ad hoc. You might 201 for, let's pretend you're a construction business, 201 for labor, 202 for materials, 203 for kitchens, 204 for extensions. So you can kind of break it down. My advice would be to keep it simple. Initially, if you're VAT registered, if you're not VAT registered, that means nothing to you. Ignore this. But if you are VAT registered, then you would do VAT exclusive, and it would add the 20% on at the bottom. Okay, but I will do a separate video for VAT. Approve that invoice. We need to put a due date. You can set default due dates. I'm going to put 2 weeks. Let's approve. And now that invoice is sat there waiting to be paid. So when we do come, when we receive the money in the bank, it's going to be the same thing again. We can match that bank receipt into your bank against the invoice. So we've looked at bank reconciliation. We've looked a little bit at sales invoices. I think, to be fair, that's the kind of 2 main things to start from. If you're new to Xero, they are the single biggest things to focus your energy on. I want to keep the video probably around 15 minutes or less. But give me a shout if there's more topics you want to dive into. I'm going to do the bank reconciliation in more detail. I'm going to talk about VAT. I'm going to talk about what reports to run. I'm going to talk about sales invoices. I'm going to talk about HubDoc, Dext. I'm going to talk about all those sort of things. But let me know if you want something covered specifically. Thanks, guys.